So, Matt, were you gonna say the names of everybody here?
I am, now that we're being recorded.
Okay.
So this is the November 16th meeting of the Transportation Systems Plan Sounding Board. We meet every third Tuesday. This is the 6th meeting. With us in attendance are the following Sounding Board members: Amy Rourke, Daniel Weaver, Jay Chester, Linda David, and Michael Andreotti. The following staff are Michael Salas, Matt Herman, and Gary Albrecht. And then we have Liz and Katie who are helping us with the interpretation. Additionally, we just had David Poland join us for the meeting. So with that, we'll get started.
As Matt said, welcome to our Transportation System Plan 6th Sounding Board meeting. And here's the agenda for today. Welcome everybody. So thank you. I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us with this important discussion on helping us build a transportation system plan. We'll go over the feedback from last month on transit and active transportation. And this month we'll cover neighborhood circulation. And we have a spot for public comment for 5 minutes at the end of the meeting. And here's our schedule. Here's where we're at. We're pretty much in the middle of it. The yellow highlights this month's topic, neighborhood circulation. And these are the 3 questions we discussed last month. Should neighborhood parks provide parking? Number 2, in addition to pedestrians and bicycles, should Clark County expand transportation planning efforts to include new active transportation technologies like e-bikes, e-skateboards, and e-foot scooters? And lastly, should emerging micro-mobility modes have specific goals and policies along with bicycles and pedestrians? This is the feedback we've heard so far on access to parks. We got some really great feedback on providing ADA parking drop-offs for residents with mobility needs at neighborhood parks. And then neighborhood parks should be served with multiple access locations for pedestrians and bicycles. And then for micro-mobility and emerging technology, I won't read all the bullet points, but just they focused around education and marketing.
Is there anything we missed from that discussion? Anything that we did not capture? Okay.
No, okay, all right. We got it all. Good job, Matt. And then the questions for this month. We've got 3 questions for the month. The first one, should we revise the minimum parking requirements for narrow lots to help reduce traffic congestion? And number 2, should Clark County reestablish a neighborhood traffic management program? And if yes, should funding be diverted from capital projects toward neighborhood traffic management? And then number 3, as we come to an end of sounding board topics, are there any topics that you want to address that we haven't talked about yet?
Matt, did you get that email that I sent? I forwarded it from Disabilities Rights by any chance? about
No.
the box where they just
No.
did it's a week-long challenge without having lawmakers and people that normally drive go a week without and ride public transportation and stuff. I guess they had a good turnout.
Oh, great. Yeah, if you could send it again, then I can forward it to the group. Make sure a lot of people spell my last name incorrectly. It's with a E-N, H-E-R-M-E-N at clark.wa.gov.
I just forwarded it from what we've been going through, but we've been emailing through, but because I was just on a Zoom with them. And have you heard of the transportation bill of rights yet that they've got in Washington? I don't know, it's all transportation stuff.
Yeah.
Of it?
Yeah, thank you. If you send that to me, I'll forward that to the group.
We've seen this map before last month. I just want to show it again. Here's the Clark County neighborhood associations. We've got 20 neighborhood associations in Clark County. So Clark County's countywide planning policy 5.0.1 discusses working with the Regional Transportation Council, RTC, to reduce reliance on single occupancy vehicle transportation. RTC's transportation plan mentions transportation demand management strategies to reduce vehicle trips on the regional transportation system. So Clark County's neighborhoods can be distinguished by many characteristics: urban, rural, regional commercial destinations, or regionally residentially dominated. The neighborhood associations are grouped into 3 categories in this slide: urban neighborhoods, both urban and rural neighborhoods, and rural neighborhoods. So this slide discusses neighborhood characteristics. Local streets in residential neighborhoods are often viewed as places for vehicles rather than places that join neighbors. We have identified 11 prominent residential neighborhoods and 10 neighborhoods with mix of residential, commercial, and industrial land. Clark County Code contains parking requirements aimed to ensure that new residents have a dedicated place for their vehicles without creating negative spillover effects on public parking in the surrounding areas. Neighborhood traffic management is not new in Clark County. In 1994, an urban neighborhood speed bump program was created. In 2000, a state law was passed known as Initiative 695, which repealed motor vehicle excise taxes. This reduced Clark County's transportation revenue streams, and the neighborhood traffic management program fell victim to this budget cut. The state law was later found by the courts to be unconstitutional, yet the neighborhood traffic management program was not restored. If you look closely at these, these images, they're traffic circles that were installed somewhere between 1998 and 2000 as part of the neighborhood traffic management program. They're very confusing, not only to the public, but to staff as well. So if you look at them, it looks like you can drive through the middle of that, or you can walk through the middle of it. It's very confusing. I've driven out there and seen it, and it's like, what in the heck is going on? So it's very confusing. There are traffic circles with wheel lanes to provide emergency vehicle access going through the circle. So it's this circle is at Northeast 88th Street and northeast, oh, I apologize, I said that wrong, northeast 88th Avenue and 99th Street. So northeast 88th Avenue is a direct route to Sunset Elementary to the south. It's about a quarter mile down the road. So northeast 76th Street and northeast 154th has one of these traffic circles that attempt to calm speeding vehicles through a residential neighborhood. We're showing these as examples of the previous program, not as treatment that we want to duplicate. We definitely don't want to see more of these.
The other thing that I should add was it was a neighborhood speed bump program. And when the speed bumps were implemented and installed, what happened was traffic was then diverted on streets that didn't have speed bumps. So it solved congestion or solved speeding vehicles on one street, but it created speeding vehicles on the other street. So it wasn't the ideal situation. There were complaints from residents that received treatment, and then complaints from residents that received the speeding vehicles in return. So it wasn't a solution that benefited the entire community.
Has anyone went down 50th, like going from Salmon Creek north towards Battleground on 50th there, where there's not speed bumps, but there's little ruts that go, you know what I'm saying? Like probably like 10 of them that they're like ruts in the ground that slow you down. They're different. I haven't seen them nowhere else in town. I just wondering if anybody else saw them. Well, somebody should check them out. They're pretty cool, actually. I think that we should do some more of those things around town.
Are you talking about the ones as you approach the stop signs?
Yeah, and there's like, yeah. You don't really, I mean, they should probably make them more visible.
Yeah, the rumble strips to alert the driver they need to stop.
Yeah.
So in September of this year, Clark County began working on the development of a neighborhood traffic management program. There are several different components that we are exploring. We currently do not have the budget to start a new neighborhood traffic management program, but we would like to present a solid program to the county council if we ask for budget to renew a program. We will have continued discussions with Clark County Council in the future.
So we're really researching what components of what best practices of a neighborhood traffic management program could serve our community. And all of these components are shown on this list. We want to be prepared to answer any questions that the council might have, but I want to make it clear that we don't have available budget to institute a new neighborhood traffic management program. We are interested in it, but we have yet to have that discussion with Clark County Council.
I have a quick question. Why is our public transportation here so not very good at all? And then just right over the bridge, it's nice. You can get around. You don't need a car over in Oregon. Or Portland, at least, you don't need one. I'm just wondering if there's like a quick answer to that.
I don't have a quick answer. That's a big
That's
question.
a C-Tran issue.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet to answer that question. It's a variety of things to encourage public transit. Yeah, I can't answer that question specifically. David,
Okay,
you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I would like to try to answer it fast. The reason is because Portland is really urban. It's really condensed. It's easy to get from one place to the other in a direct line. Here in Clark County, we have little spurts and spats of urban areas and all of this farmland in between. And to get from this city place to that city place, you have to do this great big jump but there might be houses here and there that really do need to have the transportation too. So we're just a different kind of area. That's why it's so different from Portland. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
That sums it up very well. Thank you. We've got a lot of challenges when it comes to our transportation system because of the two interstates that the state highways, the interstates, and then all the neighborhoods and the different land types throughout the county. It makes it challenging.
That's why we should do instead of bus passes all the time, we should do like Uber passes or Lyft passes. Then actually people will be getting jobs too, because they'll be doing that. And it's a lot faster.
Yes. I think CTRAN has open meetings where you can attend their public meetings and provide input as well. All right.
I'm trying,
so
but there's so many.
What's that?
Oops, I said I'm trying to get all these meetings, but there's so many. I mean, like if you guys were connected with the meeting I was on today, I'll send, and what I'll do is I'll send you guys the copy of the meeting when they send it to me today, and I'll send it to you so you can watch it. But I mean, if you were like connected with them, you know, then everybody's, I don't know, so many different things just for transportation.
Yeah, and we're all working on coordinating together. We're trying not to work in silos. So we all realize that our businesses connect with each other.
In past meetings, when we discussed transit, we did have the transit agency CTRAN representatives from them on this meeting. So we did address that during our transit topic of the month.
And this slide is discuss transportation demand management, which is a state mandate. So these strategies can be applied by neighborhoods as well. Ideas such as transit, carpooling, vanpooling, working of flex hours, and or compressed work week and working from home, which we're doing now, telecommuting, which is great, I think, for the system. So this is the stuff that we can work on with neighborhoods and transportation demand management. So this slide and the next slide discuss the neighborhood street classifications. Neighborhood circulators move traffic between collector roads. Through trips are discouraged and street parking is allowed.
Here, hold on, Gary. I think we're having trouble with the interpreter.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're good to go now. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. All right, okay, sorry. Thank you. So this slide, the next slide discusses neighborhood street circulations. Neighborhood circulators move traffic between collector roads. Through trips are discouraged and street parking is allowed. Neighborhood circulators have a 54-foot right-of-way and a 36-foot roadway width. So the picture on the bottom right is a picture of a neighborhood circulator. So it's a little bit wider than the local access, the picture on the lower left corner. Can you see that?
It's pretty small.
It's a small picture, but and so the local access roads, they've got a 46-foot wide right-of-way and a 28-foot roadway width. And the short cul-de-sacs are included in the neighborhood street classifications. The max cul-de-sac length is 150 feet and serves no more than 18 houses. Parking is allowed. Alleys serve as secondary access to the back of the lots that allows the front of the property to be free of driveways. And parking is not allowed in an alley. Clark County's Comprehensive Growth Management Plan has existing neighborhood circulation standards and policies. We have a 20-year planning goal policy to integrate land uses to reduce sprawl, promote physical activity through active transportation, and foster neighborhood and community identity. Clark County's Comprehensive Growth Management Plan, Chapter 11, the community design element, includes a neighborhood circulation-oriented policy. The goal is that housing in Clark County should provide for a variety of styles, be oriented to the street, and be supportive of pedestrian and transportation alternatives. So this slide shows the neighborhood street standards. We've got roadway types, the right-of-way, so how wide the road is, not the road, the right-of-way. Do you guys understand what that means when I say right-of-way?
So the right-of-way can include sidewalks, it can include curb, gutter, it can include the parking strip. It also includes the roadway width. So that's why you're seeing a difference between the right-of-way width and the roadway width. The roadway width is the paved surface, whereas the right-of-way is the land that's dedicated toward the transportation facility, both vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes.
Yeah, should we do the math on that and see if it actually adds up? So the 54-foot right-of-way for the neighborhood circulator, you've got the 36-foot roadway width, and then the 2 travel lanes, so 10 feet apiece. So what do we got? So 10 and 10, that's 20. And the sidewalk, both sides, let's see, a sidewalk on both sides. 30, help me out, Matt.
So the 10-foot travel lane width can be even more because there's a shy distance that's included in that too. So the travel lane width is the lane that's actually the vehicle goes down. But between the curb and the travel lane, there's some distance between the two so that cars can either go on the shoulder or veer out of the way. So it's not going to add up to 36 feet if you do the math, because there's some area in there that's not accounted for.
Perfect. Clear as mud is what I used to hear it called. The Clark County Code contains parking requirements aimed to ensure that new residents have a dedicated place for their vehicles without creating negative spillover in the surrounding area. However, parking requirements increase the cost of developing housing by increasing the land area required, unless the development incurs the added expense of structured parking. In many cases, minimum parking requirements also go beyond what is strictly needed to ensure that residents have adequate parking, which may encourage higher rates of car ownership and driving and increase congestion and pollution. We have residential parking requirements ranging between 1 to 3 parking spaces per unit. The parking requirements for commercial and residential institutions are allocated based on the number of bedrooms or beds. And places of assembly are generally based on the number of seats. Commercial parking requirements are based on square footage. we've got parking requirements for mortuaries too. 1 space, 6 seats, or 12 feet of bench length. Wow. Industrial parking requirements are also based on square footage. Clark County Code does include a neighborhood parking plan. Council may adopt an on-street neighborhood parking plan, which changes the use of public rights-of-way to increase the parking supply, changes the way parking is regulated, or incorporates a business parking improvements district established under state law. So this program actually offers credits towards off-street parking requirements as well.
So typically about once a year, the council hears considerations for either allowing or not allowing parking on the street based on the function of the street. They do this, I believe just recently they did this near the end of October. They also do this in concert when they adjust speed limits on various roads. But it is something that's consistently evaluated by our engineers, and proposed changes do come up in front of council and the planning commission to change the function of the roads.
So, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. So if you would like to talk to him or tell him about something, who could you send us the information of who to contact or who?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And also too, where does on these things here, where's it fit in? Like, where's that police parking lot, you know, for all their broke down cars? It used to be a roller skating rink there, Golden Skate on 4th Lane. What is?
I don't know.
Okay.
That
Sorry.
would be, yeah.
City Public Works. So the city plans on moving that whole site over to 94th Street in the county, the old Lickner landfill. That's where they're going to develop that site.
Okay. Why are they keeping those cars anyways? Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So this slide reviews residential parking by neighborhood using 2019 data from Clark County GIS and Esare's ArcGIS enriched data. So we're looking at vehicle ownership rates in each neighborhood. For example, Pleasant Highlands has 1,060 households, and they have 1,051 households that own at least one vehicle. So that means 9 households don't own vehicles. So based on the current parking requirement of 2 spaces per household code would require 2,120 parking spaces. However, if we only looked at the number of spaces required for households that own at least one vehicle, then only 2,102 spaces would be needed. There's a net difference between the actual number of households and the households that own vehicles, because not everyone owns a vehicle. In this case, we see a difference of 18 parking spaces. If the code required less than 2 spaces per housing unit, such as 1 per housing unit, then only 1,060 spaces would be required.
Additionally, the other thing to consider is some households have more than 2 vehicles as well. So there's that consideration to play. David, you have a question?
Yes. Well, one thing to think of also is when we're looking at the numbers, like you said, a household may have 2 or 3 vehicles for their family, and one might be a business and one might be for everyday use. Another thing to consider is the people that may not have a car right now, they might in the future. And the people that have the cars right now, like elderly people, may stop driving. So this is kind of a complicated thing when you're trying to figure out the total number of parking spaces you need to have, because again, Washington State, the governor signed a thing about having electric vehicles being the things that are sold in the future. Who knows? That could make our numbers go up or down. That's all I wanted to say.
How did they get these numbers, Emma? Where did these come from? I mean, like, did you just ask every household if they had a car?
No, so GIS, the Geographic Information System, it's an online mapping tool. So they provide a lot of mapping services. So they have data that's based on American Community Survey. So a survey went out and individuals answered these questions. So that's how the data came about.
The American Community Survey is collected by the U.S. Census Bureau.
I see. Okay.
And this slide has the number of vehicles owned by owner-occupied households. So I want to say historically, parking requirements origins are a bit of a mystery. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Donald Shoup. He's a research professor in the Department of Urban Planning at UCLA. His research has focused on parking policies affect cities, the economy, and the environment. Dr. Shoup wrote an article in February 2020, zoning practice issue of the American Planning Association. So I just want to read a little bit from that. So he wrote, at the dawn of the automobile age, suppose Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller had asked city planners could increase the demand for cars and gasoline. Consider three options. First, divide the city into separate zones, housing here, jobs there, shopping everywhere, somewhere else to create travel between the zones. Second, limit density to spread everything apart and further increase travel. The third, require ample of off-street parking everywhere so cars will be the easiest and cheapest way to travel. American cities, this is what Donald Shoup says, American cities have unwisely adopted these three car-friendly policies. Separated land uses, low density and ample free parking create drivable cities but prevent walkable neighborhoods. Although city planners did not intend to enrich the automobile and oil industries, their plans have shaped our cities to suit our cars.
Are these off-street parking spaces? I mean, off property. It does not include garages and driveways. Is that correct?
Well, these are just this is only showing the households that own vehicles. It's not saying where the household is. It does not saying where they store their vehicles.
Michael, you have a question?
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the parking. So when residential subdivisions are developed, garage spaces and driveway spaces are allowed to be counted for parking. And you are only allowed to count off or on-street spaces when doing narrow lot developments. I believe that's correct, Gary.
Well, if I look at the first chart over on the far right side, it says potential number of spaces if one parking space is required by code. I mean, and when you're saying that number includes garage space?
Well, it would, because right now the two parking space requirement that would include a garage as well.
Yeah.
So theoretically, the code only says you have to have a garage that holds two cars if you have two cars, and there shouldn't be any parking on the street or driveways.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of information about parking. So in this slide, we're looking at the number of vehicles by owner-occupied households. So in 2019, there is a total of 37,031 vehicles owned by owner-occupied households.
But you are correct. If you have a garage, two-car garage, you satisfy the code requirements.
But generally with other code requirements, you're gonna have a 2-car driveway in front of a 2-car garage.
Just because of the setbacks and
Yeah,
stuff. Okay. Something just wasn't adding up to me. What this all means. I mean, it's kind of almost meaningless to me. But
Yeah, it gets very confusing because because if you look at the parking spaces, it's a car, and where's the car going to drive? And if we're trying to make if we've got policies that say let's find another way to get around Clark County other than driving, but everyone has a place to park their car, it's not making it any easier to get around because we're providing spaces for cars and not for pedestrians and bikes.
right.
I mean, I mean, we're just looking at this whole system a little differently. That's all. Because parking is a challenge, and most people don't like to talk about parking because it automatically parking is it's equated to like a right. It's my right. You can't take away my right to park.
Well, you go through some of the older neighborhoods and where they have, I mean, getting even down to a single car garage. I mean, you got people living there that got 2 and 3 cars, and you're inevitably have cars parked on the street, and it becomes very dangerous to drive down those streets because of the number of cars that are parked on the street.
Michael?
so, the parking requirements are generally for off-street parking, and it doesn't account for the fact that there is still on-street parking allowed. And I think part of that is to make sure there's guest parking available, those sorts of things when you get into neighborhoods and stuff like that. But additionally, that on-street parking is a traffic calming measure. And the difficulty we have in today's society is that everyone wants to go so fast that they don't worry about the fact that there's cars parked on the street, which would typically slow people down, therefore creating that more dangerous situation that you were just mentioning.
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch interpreters here. Oops. That's all right. Let me figure this out.
David, say I can see the interpreter, but they're not highlighted. There you go. Perfect. Now I can see well. Great. Thank you.
So this slide shows the number of vehicles owned by renter-occupied households. In 2019, there is a total of 12,031 vehicles owned by renter-occupied households. Renter-occupied households own less vehicles than owner-occupied households.
Gary, on the renter versus owner occupied, was there any data on whether or not it was multifamily versus single family?
No.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Weaver, this slide gets back to your question. What does all this mean? I mean, it's kind of meaningless when you talk about parking spaces, but we're trying to put this into perspective. So this slide reviews the assumption that each single family resident generates 9.44 daily trips per household. So data through ArcGIS looking at housing units and vehicle availability. So there are approximately 3% less number of trips when comparing the required 2 parking spaces per household to the number of trips based on household ownership rates. For example, the Pleasant Highlands Neighborhood Association number of assumed trips per household on a parking requirement of 2 spaces per household is 20,013 trips. We only looked at the number of trips based on households with cars. The number of trips drops to 19,843. All right, here we go. I want to, Dr. Shoup had some recommendations from his article. I just want to share his conclusions. So assembling support for parking reform is like opening a combination lock. I think we can all agree on that. So each small turn of the dial seems to achieve nothing, but when everything is in place, the lock opens. 3 reforms can open the parking combination lock. 1, remove off-street parking requirements. 2, change market prices for on-street parking. 3, spend the revenue for neighborhood public services. Repealing off-street parking requirements and replacing them with market prices for on-street parking may at first seem like a Herculean task, almost the prohibition or the reformation, too big of an upheaval for society to accept. Nevertheless, this strategy should attract voters from across a wide political spectrum. Conservatives will see it reduces government regulations. Liberals will see that it increases public spending. Environmentalists will see that it reduces energy consumption, air pollution, and carbon emissions. Urban designers will see that it enables people to live at higher density without being overrun by cars. Developers will see that it reduces building costs. Residents will see that it improves the neighborhood's public services. Drivers of all political stripes will see that it guarantees convenient curb parking. Elected officials will see that it depoliticizes parking, reduces traffic congestion, and allows infill development, and provides public services without raising taxes. Finally, planners can devote less time to parking and more time to improving cities.
So can I kind of summarize that, Gary?
Yeah.
So what this professor is saying is that instead of governments regulating spots based on the land use, the parking spaces are developed, the amount of parking spaces are developed based on the development that's happening. It's based on if a developer needs to build a shopping center, they determine how many spaces they need to serve that shopping center rather than the local jurisdiction. So it kind of flips the paradigm for the local jurisdiction regulating it rather than it being a demand-based equation based on the development that's proposed.
Thank you, Matt.
I think that is a very interesting option because when you get onto some of those smaller sites and say a commercial site or something like that, it never develops because they can't put in a big enough building to make their money because they've got to put too many parking spaces in. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how that would impact some of those smaller commercial sites in some of the neighborhoods around the county.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I wish Mr. Housley was here with us. He's from the Development Engineering Advisory Board. I'd love to hear what he has to say about this topic. Maybe someday we'll be able to revisit the parking issue. So now back to the questions. These are the questions for this month. So number 1, should we revise minimum parking requirements for narrow lots to help reduce traffic congestion?
So I just did a project that was entirely narrow lots, and the parking requirement was one of the biggest public comment that we received. The biggest concern was basically, all these people parking on the street. And I think the one thing that the narrow parking requirements do is require you to point out that there will be parking on the street, because that's about the only way you're going to meet the 2.5 per lot requirement. Sometimes you can meet it with a 2-car garage, but it just depends on the product being developed. But at the same time, I think when you look at a narrow lot, you have to consider the fact that people sometimes own 2 and 3 cars and they have guests. So where are those people going to park? So I kind of see a value in the 2.5 per space or per unit requirement versus trying to change that. I think it might be more about changing people's views on parking in general and on street parking that might be beneficial.
I was gonna ask them, so this doesn't have anything to do with in apartments, right? Right, the parking lots like in apartments, right? No?
Well, it would, because it's a parking requirement.
Well, I mean, I've lived in places and I've been to lots of apartments that have like no parking for their guests at all. And if you get parking, you get one parking spot. And there's usually two people in a household, it seems like. Well, I don't know. Anyways, but another thing is I don't see on these things on the neighborhood associations. I mean, I live on Nicholson, right? By the Bridge Creek Trail. There's a dead end right down here. We just had an incident just today. That's why I'm like asking you guys, because they just like police came and just like towed, I don't know, like 10 vehicles from out here because people park there. They're homeless people, a lot of them, and they walk to the trail and they keep their car parked right there. So like for places like that, these people just lost their home on wheels because there's no parking signs out here. And well, I don't know where I was on the neighborhood association. That's what I was trying to get at with that. I was trying to research and do that, but Bridge Creek is not on there, right?
And
No.
so Bridge Creek is in the city of Vancouver. So I do understand your concern as far as the
City.
on-street parking does provide some people a place to park their homes. And it's necessary for that.
Gary, is there a reason the question is focusing on the narrow lots?
No. Should we just should we revise the parking requirements, period?
Yes. I think they can, I mean, in times they can hinder development, and the thought of that market-driven parking, the developer decides what they need. A lot of times they want more parking than is required anyway, but there's a lot of cases like I was talking about with the smaller lots where they just can't develop because they can't meet that requirement.
Yeah, and our parking standards were adopted in 1997.
Yeah.
It's like, well, and I don't know where they came from and how they got created. I mean, they were in, it was part of Title 12 before we did Title 40. It was Title 18. So it might be time just to revisit all of them.
David, you had your hand raised.
Move my hearing aid here. So what I'm understanding here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're really focusing hard on getting rid of on-street parking. That's somehow bad. And
Well,
as a,
we're not.
Just let me.
Okay.
I just let me finish my thought, and then you can answer. And yeah, because it's hard for me to think of other people's talk at the same time. And Amy made the point about homeless people, and there's homeless people in the county too, not just the city. They live everywhere. They live in the county. I've seen them here. And both of us do represent on CAB the people that are poor and people that are homeless. And no, not everybody that's poor has 3 junkers. I don't even own a car, but I know lots of people who do. And it just seems to me that I can't really trust real estate agents and developers and construction companies to have the best interest of our community, of our residents. I'm not going to say I necessarily trust the government either. No offense to you guys around the government, but with the government representing us, officially representing us, I can go to my representative in the county and I can say, hey, this is what is happening to me. Please represent me. And they can pass laws. They can change laws. And I realize we're doing this to try to help the county, of course, but My thinking is I don't want to give all the power to developers to decide for themselves this is how much parking I want to have. I'm a little concerned about just that statement. So correct me if you want to, or just give me your thoughts on it. That's fine. Thank you.
Gary, can I start with the first?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're not recommending elimination of on-street parking by any means. That is not something we're considering. On-street parking is required based on the classification of streets. They are allowed on local streets that you see in neighborhoods. We're not proposing changing the standards to not allow parking on streets. So we're strictly talking about off-street parking and the requirements that go in it. I think with the information that Gary shared with Dr. Shoup, he was mostly talking about the off-street parking or the private parking that's required for the development. And that's kind of what we're focused on is if that off-street parking requirements. So if a shopping center comes in and they have to build 100 parking spots to serve their development, is that number best determined by the government, or is it best to be determined by the development itself? Not the on-street parking. With the narrow lots that was brought up earlier, they are an anomaly where they are able to count the on-street parking toward their required parking spots. So that's a whole different ballgame than the development itself.
So if I can add to, since you said that, can I add to my question then? Okay, so we're not talking about the on-street parking. We're talking about like you said, a store, a mall or something, a strip mall, or business of some kind. They're going to need to have parking spaces. And as previously a person had mentioned, well, and sometimes the size of the building, they had to make it smaller than they really needed to because they had to have the requirement of parking. Let's flip that over and say, suppose a developer decided, I don't really want to spend any money on any parking. They can just all park on the street, or they can go park in the neighborhoods. I just want a big building. And so that's why I'm like, again, concerned. Could there be some negative ramification if we just give all the power to them and they're like, I'm going to have zero parking?
Well, hey, David, so we're not recommending having developers set the parking requirements. That was a suggestion from a recommendation from Dr. Shoup. And all we're looking at is parking as far as a component of congestion and the transportation system. How does it relate? So it's a topic that doesn't really get touched on much, but it contributes to our daily lives. So parking.
I have 3 people that just lost their homes that'll have write you guys letters tonight.
So
Really.
that's and I'm very sad
And it's
about
in
that.
city limits where I live. It is city. The SR 500 is where it separates.
So, and I apologize that my answer to your question was regarding this city of Vancouver specifically. I know that we have people living on their cars in the unincorporated Clark County, and that's not foreign at all. And they have the right to park there. They have the right to live in their vehicles. That is not, we're not trying to move them. They have absolutely every right to do that.
Well, what I'm saying is they just got towed from here that right now, just right before I got on this meeting that's happened. And I'm in city limits and the Burtbridge Creek Trail is right there. There's constantly people walking to that trail. And how the development is here, there is no parking really back in the cul-de-sac. It's so narrow that people park out there that live in this complex and as well as that walk the trail and that live on the trail. And so I'm just saying this is like not just 1 or 2. There's probably like 10 or 15 or 20 different people that's cars park out here within a week's time that affects. It's not just like one person or nothing. I was just saying, yeah. Okay, never mind.
Michael?
I just wanted to add a little to David's comment about a developer, not wanting any parking. And, most private developers obviously are out to make their money just like anybody else that has a job. And ultimately, any development that goes in for commercial, they're going to want some amount of parking on the site because they know that there's a chunk of population that doesn't want to walk anywhere. So just from my 15 plus years of experience in private development, I don't know of a developer that wouldn't put some parking on a site. Because then the development itself is just going to fail and they're going to have an empty building.
Yeah, so Michael, so I've been at the county, so this December, it will be, oh gosh, 16 years, and we haven't really talked about parking. Because every time we talk about parking, it causes a lot of emotions. And there are several issues that come about, and from the transportation system plan, it's just it's something that we needed to look at.
Yeah.
Is to visit the parking, because community planning is working on a housing study right now, and one of their recommendations in that I've seen is to reduce the parking requirements. Is that the parking requirements increase the price of housing, so that it goes into the affordability of housing. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just it's the parking requirements. They've been in place since 1997. Is it time to visit them? And that's all we're looking for.
Worst parking in this town is the VA center. Very
Yeah.
worst.
I think another huge benefit would be flexibility. For people, because every site's a little different, every situation's a little different. If there was flexibility for people, it would also help with, the cost of things in the parking. I don't know how you would provide that immediately off the top of my head, but that's the thing that comes to mind. When you're doing a site development, if you had flexibility in parking options, more than just saying you have to have 2 spaces per this, maybe there was some way that there could be something that could be come up with, to come up with a total. It's still a requirement and still somewhat regulated, but also allows that flexibility. I don't know what that would be right now, though.
Well, it could be if it was adjacent to transit line.
We're going to pause so I can switch the interpreters.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Okay.
Matt, what do you think? Should we move on? We got an answer?
Yeah, I think we have. We can summarize the conversation and move that forward to the next meeting. So the next question is, should Clark County reestablish a neighborhood traffic management program? And I think that's a pretty easy question, but if yes, this is noting that our budgets are not are zero-sum game, and money has to come from somewhere. So where should it come from? Maybe not capital projects, maybe some other funding source, but where is neighborhood traffic management at the priority level if it is reestablished? Linda?
Yeah. Are you having a lot of requests from neighborhoods to reinstitute a traffic management program?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's one of the things that is kind of very frustrating on our side. When we received requests for neighborhood traffic issues, we refer them quite often to the sheriff's office. and for enforcement issues. Sheriff's office says, well, we can't do anything about it because we don't have the resources to patrol every street at all times. And then they refer it back to Public Works. And we have it and we say, well, we don't have a neighborhood traffic management program. We can't install speed bumps. We can't do other implementations to calm the traffic. So it becomes this back and forth in this unfortunate circle that it puts the residents in that doesn't come up with a solution for them. And as staff, it's one of the very frustrating things that we deal with when we can't solve a problem because of budgets.
It sounds like there'd be a lot of benefit to the neighborhood traffic management program, and maybe it ends up being a program that works with the neighborhoods to help find funding, or, you know, could you guys fundraise X amount of dollars and we can find this grant, and then we can put in, you know, maybe not direct funding from the county all the time, but, you know, working with neighborhoods to find solutions that they can be involved in as well, besides just saying this is the solution in this case.
There's, go ahead, Mr. Weaver.
Is this primarily in established neighborhoods, or is this in new neighborhoods, or is it both?
It's both. We see it both in new neighborhoods and in existing neighborhoods. What happens is there's change happening throughout the county, and that change is heard by residents that either first move into their new home or residents that have been living in their neighborhood for a long time. That there's increased volumes of traffic on streets all over the county.
There was like 118 million federal transportation funding for 2019 to 22 for Clark County. Where'd all that go?
So our current funding is dedicated both toward operations, which is a large amount. That's the people that are repairing our streets that are failing. We also invest in projects, new projects to serve new growth. We additionally invest in traffic signal upgrades. We invest in multimodal. All of the money that's dedicated toward Clark County is allocated and is implemented. And we have a duty where we have to spend the money that we receive. We do not just sit on money.
Can you use some of the funding from permits and development, whatever permits are required for developments, in studying the traffic, get some funds out of that, and then use that as a, I'll say, a learning process or a training grounds, if you will, to do some retrofit in older neighborhoods?
So that's potential. There's other jurisdictions that we've seen that have put the financial burden on the residents themselves, which where the residents actually pay for the speed bumps. In our estimation, that creates an unfair system where the rich neighborhoods can pay for their improvements, but the other neighborhoods that aren't as financially wealthy as cannot pay for traffic management solutions.
That creates a fun experience.
Yeah. So I don't, and we've seen that system implemented in other jurisdictions, and it hasn't been implemented well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Well, it sounds like we need to tax the rich. what we have been focused on recently anyway, maybe superficially, I'm blunt, but people claim they want diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that doesn't just mean gay and black, by the way. That means if you got a senior citizen and an older home, and there's a lot of other older homes, and they aren't rich people, they're and they own the home and they can barely pay the taxes. By golly, their husband, before he died, he put enough money in so that they wouldn't be homeless. Okay, they have the same rights that we were talking about with the rich people in their neighborhoods. And so we need to find a way, if they need to slow those young people down from speeding, that the money will go equally to all the neighborhoods. Like you said, it has to be fair. Now, as far as speed bumps go, I just want to make this quick because I don't want us to go much longer. But I remember when those speed bumps went in. I was young, and I sure didn't like it when my friends wanted to go zooming down the hills. Because we went to Prairie. It wasn't very fun to get a bump. It was much funner to go yay and jump. So I didn't personally like the bumps at the time. As for people that had cars, some of those bumps were really high. I know they've changed it since then, but at the time they were so high. If you had a low floor kind of car, it scraped the bottom of some of the cars when you went over, even if you went normal speed, like it said. So some people just didn't like it because it destroyed the cars. If speed bumps work, then we should do them. If speed bumps don't work because it's diverting it to other places, probably to the poorer neighborhoods, then that's not equity. Then we shouldn't waste our money on it, because then we're building stuff and we're going to have to build more stuff and it's just not going to work. That's all I had to say.
Great. So it sounds like, from what I've heard, is we should explore reestablishing the neighborhood traffic management program and figure out a way to fund it.
And then lastly, as we come to the end of the sounding board topics, are there any topics that you want us to address that we haven't talked about yet?
I know earlier, jokingly, Mr. Weaver, I believe it was, talked about the flooding. I don't know if on our schedule we had environmental. I think that might be a topic worth exploring if the sounding board wants to.
There were some members from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee that had brought up environmental topics in the past when we were talking about these items.
Okay. Okay. Any other topics that the sounding board wishes to discuss that we haven't addressed in our previous meetings? Okay. All right.
Hold on. Where are we at? Of course, I have to share this with you guys. Report a road concern. So here's a link for to report any issues that don't require immediate attention, such as potholes or vegetation issues. Filling out an online maintenance request is an excellent way to report a road concern in the link below. And then for speeding, Public Works does not enforce speed laws or issue traffic or parking citations. Residents who want information about enforcement should contact Clark County Sheriff's Office. You can click the link in the PowerPoint or call the Sheriff's Speeding Hotline. And that's it.
I think we also had I'm not seeing any general public in the meeting, but we did have time for comments if there were any. Okay. All right.
I think that concludes our meeting then. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for your feedback. Oh,
and then,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so next month we're not going to meet. since it's the holiday season. So we're going to skip December and we'll pick this back up in January. All right. So happy holidays to everybody, and we'll see you next year.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Eli.
I'll see
Happy
you in
Thanksgiving.
25 minutes,
Merry
Mike.
Christmas. Happy
Yep.
Hanukkah. Happy New Year.